What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, BJ Dell, and today is another drawing tutorial in my 26-part series where I show you how to draw the entire alphabet, every single letter as an animal using the iPad in Procreate. Today, we're going to be doing this cute little gecko for the letter G. And a special shout out goes to MBinding11 who made the suggestion for today's animal. So if you guys have any suggestions going forward, any animals that you want to see coming up, H through Z left, leave a comment down below and you might see your idea come to life in one of the upcoming videos. But today, it's all about the gecko, so let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Starting out, I'm using a 4000 pixel by 4000 pixel 300 DPI canvas. It's an RGB canvas. For my brush today, I'm gonna start out sketching with my Brainstorm sketch brush that is part of my Essential Creator set for Procreate. That's available right now on Gumroad. Links down in the description for that. And then later on, we're gonna switch over to some of these other ones further on into the tutorial. And then finally, for my color palette, once again, I've got this pre-made, so if you want to download the exact same colors that I'm using in today's tutorial, you can get that for free on my website. If you go to bjdell.com, underneath the YouTube reference materials page, all that is linked down in the description below too, so check it out if you want to pick that up and follow along. So let's go ahead and get started. To begin with, I want to get a letter G in here, just kind of as a guide or a reference. So I'm going to go up here to the Actions menu by hitting the wrench. We're going to go to Add, that tab there, and then Add Text. Type in G, and then I'm going to double tap here to highlight it. We'll tap on our font to bring up the menu here to where we can change the font. We're going to go over to Arial. That's what I've been using for the rest of the videos in this series. And then for style, we're going to select Bold. So we'll hit Done. Obviously, it's too small now, so we need to make it bigger by going up here to the arrow to transform this. And then we will stretch it out. I've got snapping here turned on, so you'll see these orange lines come up. That kind of tells us that we're centered. So we need the horizontal and the vertical. Once we've got that, hit our menu to lock it in. Then I'm going to hold down on that layer and drag it under layer 1. So layer 1 is going to be our sketch layer. This is our kind of reference here, but too dark right now, so we need to hit the N for blend mode. And then we're going to drop the opacity down to whatever you feel comfortable. I think 12% looks all right. We're going to come back up here to layer 1. Once again, using that Brainstorm sketch brush and black, we can go ahead and get started. So with the G for gecko, I kind of see this part here being the tail, so it's kind of curved up and around, and then the body's going to kind of wrap here into the head up here. So if you guys have picked up this Essential Creator set, I actually drew a gecko as part of the tutorial for that set, but I went ahead and chose gecko for this as well based on one of the suggestions left by a viewer, just because I think that's a really cool thing if you're starting out as an artist to see multiple approaches to the same subject matter. So even though I've done a gecko before, I think this would be kind of cool to see an alternate take on it, if you will. So let's go ahead then. I'm gonna, switch back the layers here. Let's go ahead and start with the tail. I'm gonna grab the tail here and kind of have it come out, like I said, into a point here. It's gonna come back over top of itself. Bring that around, and since it is coming over top of the body here, it's gonna kind of have some creases and some folds in it, showing that bend. And then it'll come back up here. With this, just keeping everything really loose, really sketchy. It's one of the things that I preach in all my videos, is that I don't spend too much time just nailing all the details and making sure everything looks perfect in the sketch process, because you're going to draw on top of it when you do the inks. So spending too much time, making sure that this is pretty is just a waste of time, because you're going to draw over top of it and you're not even going to use this here. So maybe I should make these look better for my videos in case somebody just watches the sketch process and thinks, oh, this looks like garbage, but hey, it is what it is. So there we go. I got the tail in there. Now is where I start in with some basic shapes. So we'll have the head up here. So I've got an oval kind of showing where that goes. I want the one leg or arm, whatever you want to call it. I want that one to be here. So once again, drawing some basic shapes. And the other one's going to be down here, kind of coming up here. So this is the other thing that I also talk about in my videos and kind of preach is basic shapes are the way to visualize an idea. If you've got something in your head that you want to get out and you want to draw it and you're a new artist starting out and you're having issues with that, I think probably the most common reason for that for new artists is they just want to jump in and start drawing the outlines. They just see kind of the final piece in their head, so they're going to start drawing every single, you know, line here for these legs and the feet. And instead of breaking it down to the simplest forms, like with these ovals, focusing on those outlines just leads to disaster. So that's why I really urge you, if you are a new artist starting out, or I still do this, you know, as a seasoned artist, I use the basic shape technique to just get everything where I want it to go, and it makes a world of difference. It really helps you, like I said, get that idea out of your head and onto the canvas or the paper or whatever you're using. It makes it a lot easier. And then just connecting these shapes that we did, you can see how easy it is for this to take shape. Also allows us to, using those basic shapes, to really make sure that, you know, the sizes on these match up from one to the next, so you don't have one super small and one super big. So those line up a lot better that way. And then we can move up here to the head. So I'm going to bring up kind of the shape of the head a little bit higher here. And then we'll bring this around. This will be kind of the mouth here coming up into almost like a smile. We'll have him kind of grinning. We'll have the crease there for the grin. And then I'm going to bring this line back a little bit here. We'll have a cheek coming in there over the top of the grin. Bring the bottom of the mouth down here. I'm going to stop that before I get to the edge or the front, because we'll probably have like a lip here on the bottom. So we'll have that there, and then kind of blocking out where the eyes go. So we'll have a couple of ovals here for the eyes. This one's going to be tucked behind the head, the kind of perspective we've got going on there. Then I think too we'll have like a brow coming up over top of these. So we'll get that in there. Bring this one around. And we can start to get the eye in here now. So I'm gonna erase a little bit of that brow because I might change that in the back, the direction just a little bit. Get these in there. Kind of adjusting these lines as we go. I think probably have a line come out here and like a little crease underneath here, so it's almost like a fold or a bag under the eye there. It's going to kind of come back in there as well. I think it looks pretty good. We'll get the pupils in here. Can have them looking back there to the left. Just darkening things up as we go, and you can kind of see what we're left with there, and I think that is pretty good. I'm going to pull this line a little bit further up, have another crease back there. I think that looks a little bit better. So there we go. There is our sketch. Like I said, loose, rough, really kind of brainstormy. That's why I named it that. So there's our sketch. We're ready to now start on the inks. So let's do that next. So to begin the inks, we're going to come up here. I'm going to turn off the G now because we don't need that anymore. I'm going to make a new layer on top, and this is going to be our inks layer. Now, if you're bothered by your sketch, if you think, hey, I need to fine tune it a little bit more to visualize a little bit cleaner, you could always now drop the opacity of your sketch, which we're gonna do anyways. And then you could draw another sketch on top of this. So I could come in here and then just start sketching like this. So I've got still a sketch, but it's just a lot cleaner now and it looks, you know, a lot nicer. So if you feel that you really need to do that, you could at this point do that. For me, like I said, if I'm doing the inks and I know I'm gonna draw everything on top of it already, it just seems like a waste of time to, you know, do that and then do it all over again with another brush. So that's why I really just worry about doing the inks. It's up to you though. So to do the inks, let's go to Smooth Inker then. I'm gonna select that, and then from here, I'm gonna tap on that to open the Brush Studio. And there's a lot of curve lines with this. So what I wanna do is I wanna come down to Stabilization, and I wanna turn Streamline all the way up. This just kind of gets rid of any handshakes that you have. Like if your hand is a little shaky on some of these lines, it's gonna get rid of that, and it's gonna clean things up just a little bit. So using that is kind of key here. I've got the size here set to 7%. Hit the opacity all the way here to the top, and then I'm gonna start on the lines. So here I'm just gonna start with a taper. Now with tapers, it's just a light press and then a heavier press as the line comes around, and then once again a light press in the end, and then you kind of have to lift up your brush at the end, or your Apple Pencil there at the end. That's the key to getting tapers like this. So we'll just bring these lines down and around, get that eye locked in there, kind of pull out here so we can see a little bit better. We'll just continue on with these lines. Get the tapered line there for that smile back there. Get this eye in here. Pull kind of a tapered line there around so that looks like the overlap of that little crease there at the bottom. Get the eye in here, or the pupil, and then get the pupil on this side. And you'll see I held down there to kind of lock it in, so it's a nice, perfect shape there. Get that. I think bring this line around for that part there. I'm going to stop it there before it gets into the cheek. I don't want it coming all the way around. I'm also going to twist the canvas now. And this is where I was kind of having a difficult time doing that the way it was. My arm didn't really want to make that motion. So turning it and starting it from the other direction really allows me to get that line that I want. So that's one of my other pieces of advice. Is just to kind of move your canvas around. You're going to find more comfortable positions depending on the way that your arm or your hand wants to go. So bring the bottom of that down there, and then pull them back out. You can kind of see what we've got for the head. I think that's looking pretty good. All right, continue with the lines here. And then there, I'm going to stop right now. Whoops. So we've got these big body lines now. These are really, really big. That's why we turned on that streamline, really curved. And here is where I kind of like to have a little bit more control over the lines. If you start here, you're almost gonna have a shake, or you're gonna go over top of that line. I like to get the kind of flow in the direction going ahead of time. So to do this, what I do is I come up to the layers, I make a new layer. Now I can actually start this line back in here. Since it's a separate layer, I can use the eraser to erase any of the overlaps that I make with these lines that I've already got done. So now that I've got that done, I can start this line and then bring it around, and you see I've got a lot more control. Now holding down, I want you to kind of see this again here. Holding down, you can kind of see the shape that it's making. If I hold down, that shape changes. So you kind of a double-sided sword here. You get the nice smooth line, but you also get the more perfect shape, but you lose the shape that you started with. So that can be fixed fairly easy. So if we stop there, we can grab the arrow here. Since this is on a separate layer of the head, then we can use warp and we can kind of fine tune this line by pulling the edges here out and around. Now with this, I would recommend to be careful, because if you do too much here, let me pull this line way in here and you're going to see what happens. That line totally changes as far as the line weight goes. So if you want a consistent line weight, you can't pull in or out too much, because you're going to either widen that or you're going to make it thinner. So definitely use that sparingly. Also, as you start moving around more and more, you're also going to lose some of the resolution. You're going to have a blurriness to it. But now that we've got that done, you can see we can go back in here with the eraser and we can erase these overlaps, and we don't have to worry about hitting those lines that we've already done. Now I am going to come in here a little bit tighter so you can see a little bit better. I'm going to bring this line down because it stops a little bit too close there. So we'll bring that line down farther. And there we go. You see how that's a lot easier doing that technique and using the multiple layers. Now let's go ahead and pinch those together so we're back all on one layer, and we'll do another new layer here for the inside portion. So we'll bring this up and around. I'm gonna pull that down a little bit further here. Holding down once again, and we can use the arrow with that warp, kind of pull that exactly where we want it to go. All right, then erase the overlaps, and there we go. Let me go ahead and pinch those together so they are all on one now, and then just kind of repeat the process here. So another new layer here. Pull up the tail up and around. Try that one more time here. I want a little bit thinner here at the end or the tip. So we'll bring that around. Now where these lines connect, I can just pull this back, have those meet just like that. Continue this process here. Once again, turning the canvas as I go, just because my arm's a lot more comfortable going that direction. So there we are. I think that might come down a little bit too much there with this one. It's making the tail a little too thick. So I'm going to bring this line up a little bit further here. If I can try to match it up. Just like that. And then we'll leave that last crease out and we'll just put this one in. I'm going to start the taper from the back there. I think that looks a little bit better. All right, now we can kind of continue with some sketchy lines here to kind of show that fold coming out even further, and just bring in some lines there. Okay, looking good. So back up to our layers. I'm going to pinch those together so they're all on one now, and I'm going to go ahead and come in here on the end of the tail. Of course, I want it to look like a G, but I don't want it to be so sharp right there, so I'm going to pull this back just a little bit, and then coming back in, I'm just going to curve this line around on the outside and around on the inside so it doesn't have such a hard angle there. I think that looks a little bit better. Okay, back up to our layers menu. Another new layer here for the arms and the legs. Back to our brush, and then bringing these lines around, which this one I'm just going to make one big swooping line here, and we'll just continue this line all the way up into these. Back down. Also going to come in here and taper these out a little bit so they've got a little bit of a fold or a crease or an overlap to them. I think that looks kind of good. And this is the part where I start adding in little details like that too, that I didn't do during the sketch stage. Like that. We'll probably add in like a little elbow there, like just like almost like a G or a 6 that doesn't connect. That's what I use for elbows or kneecaps, and we'll do the same thing here. So bringing this up and around, that. We'll have the crease here. Erase a little bit so we've got room for a crease. And then that little G or 6. Now we can come back to our layers menu and we can then erase the overlaps. Once again, you can see just how easy this makes everything, how much time it saves rather than you saw with the end of that G on the tail, how careful I had to be just erasing and trying to get those to match up. And now, of course, you can see just how fast this is compared. Those overlaps there, and then I'm going to come up here, pinch everything together so they're all on one now, and then clean up little marks like that. I'm going to come in here a little bit tighter, add these tapers around, then pull them back out. You can see what we're left with. So I'm going to come up here now to the layers menu. I'm going to turn off the sketch to see what we've got, and I think that looks pretty darn good. So from here, this is where I'll go in and once again with the brush, just add in some of these extra tapered crease lines here using the eraser. If I want to get the tapers just a little bit tighter there or a little bit more control over those, I'll probably do the same thing back here. Just make that one a little bit more sharp. That one a little bit more sharp too. Yeah, might as well do these two. You can see there, I didn't zoom in enough. I try not to zoom in too much, in and out too much during these videos at least, because I know it gets a little bit annoying. So zooming in and out will really make sure that you've got all the stuff like that, those little misses. Make sure that you don't have too many of those. So there we go. Let's see what else. I think that looks pretty good for right now. We'll add some more stuff as we go along. But there's our inked version. Now we're ready to add the color flats, which with this one, it's going to be super quick. So let's do that next. So to begin the color flats, let's come up here to our layers menu. Let's make a new layer underneath layer 3. And layer 3, then we're going to tap this. We're going to set this as reference. So this is going to allow us to drag and drop all of our colors onto layer 4. And it's going to use the layer 3 inks as a guide for where the colors go. So now that we've got that done, let's go back up to our color palette, switch over to green, drag and drop this in, and then I'm going to hit continue filling up here. That allows me to tap in those areas to fill it in rather than having to drag and drop every time. Then I'm going to come back up here, make another new layer, and then we're going to switch over to this yellow for the eyes. And we'll throw those in. And that's our color flats. Not a lot of different colors in this. I was thinking about maybe doing the belly different and adding in some spots, but feel free to do that if you want to. It's just going to make the video a lot longer, so I decided just to stick with this to kind of speed things up. One thing I do want to do though is I want to add in some highlights here on the eyes before we actually get into the actual highlighting stage. And these I like to do on top. So if we go to layer 3, let's make a new layer on top of that. And then we'll just select white in the background. I didn't even get this in the color palette. So just holding down in the back, we'll select white and see how it changes as we move around. So we'll just select white. And I'm going to have the light source coming in from this top right hand corner. So I'm going to fix this one pupil here though. I need this to come back a little bit further just because of the perspective that we've got. That needs to be back a little bit more. So now in this new layer, layer 6, holding down on that white, we're just going to add in some ovals here for the highlights coming from that top right hand corner. And there we go. We've got those in there. So the color flats are done. We've got those set. We're now ready to add the shadows and the highlights. Before we get to that though, you're going to see I'm going to select all these layers. So the ones that we have visible, we don't need the sketch or that. And then now that we have this done, I'm going to grab the arrow with either freeform or uniform. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to bring him over a little bit more here in the center. As I started changing stuff, everything got a little bit skewed there and a little bit off center, so just wanted to make sure he was where he needed to be. So there we go. Let's go ahead now and jump into the shadows and the highlights. So to begin this, we're going to come up here to our layers menu. Let's do the body itself first. So with that selected, I'm going to make a new layer on top of this one. And we're going to tap this and we're going to set it as clipping mask. So what clipping mask allows us to do is we can color in on this layer. It's only going to show up on the area that's colored in on layer 4. Clipping mask works a lot like Alpha Lock. The difference is it's non-destructive because it's on a separate layer. So once we start adding in shadows and highlights here, we can actually go in and use the eraser and it only erases that. If we did Alpha Lock, it's going to be on the same layer as the green. So if we use the eraser, it's going to erase our green too. We couldn't use the eraser at all without affecting that. So that's why I like clipping mask for this. So with that selected then, coming up to our color palette, I've got this green here on the second row. We're going to use that first. But first we need to come back up to our brush library and switch our brush to the soft rendering brush. So that's what we're going to use to begin with. I'm going to make the size here big, 28%. I've got the opacity set at 32%. Like I said, light source is coming in from this top right. So shadows are going to come back here and down at the bottom. Have some under here, kind of back behind and underneath the legs there. So with that decided then, I'm going to start to just bring in the shadows. I'm actually going to make this even bigger here. So I've got this set about 47% now. Start to bring up shadows along the back and along the top up here. All right, now I need to pull some in here behind the legs. I want to make sure though that I don't go over the edge. So here we could always come in here and start to add some in like this and then go in and erase. But another technique we can use is the lasso. So if we use the select here and then use freehand, if we go ahead and kind of trace on this line, we want to make sure it doesn't go over to that right hand side. We're just going to bring this up and around and connect it. So now when we come in here with this brush, see we've got total control, it doesn't go past there. So it's directly under here. Now we do have kind of a line there that we need to get rid of. So if we use the smudge tool, and if we hold down, it'll set that as the same brush. I've actually got it already set as this, but we can just kind of smudge that around so it matches up. And we can use the same technique down here. So grabbing that select, we're gonna, oops, one more time here. And kind of pull down and around. We just need to make sure it's on this line. Connecting it and then back to the brush. We can start to pull in. I'm going to make this smaller though. I'm going to do that 28%. That was half of the reason why it kind of went outside there, or made the hard line, sorry, not outside, but that hard line. So we're going to bring that around, hit the selection tool again. You can see makes it really nice and easy to stay inside there. We'll do the same thing here around the bottom and around the back. So using that selection tool, we don't want to hit the fingers there. So bring this up and down. Bring in a shadow there around and kind of back in here. Hit select again to undo it. And then the smudge just to bring that up around there in the back. And I think honestly making a smaller brush here, I'll just bring this completely around there into the back part of the eye, or the back part of the head until it meets the eye, and then using the eraser, holding down, we can just kind of pull that back a little bit. Okay. Same thing here, the selection tool. We're gonna select around the bottom of the mouth here. Bring this line around and connect, and then back to the brush. We can start to bring in a shadow underneath there. This is going to be pretty much all the way shadowed in. I'm going to add a secondary shadow to this here in a little bit. And then there we go. So you can see how that selection tool really helps making the brush even smaller here. I'm not going to use the selection tool here because I'm just coming in underneath here. So we'll use that in the eraser just to kind of speed up the process there. And then down here at the bottom, have a little bit underneath and then erase the overlap. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Making the brush kind of the mid-size. I'm going to bring in a little bit of a shadow here. I don't want it to touch though the edge here. I just want it on kind of the more centered portion there. We'll do the same thing here. It's kind of just as a value shift, so we just make it a little bit more interesting there. Breaks that up a little bit more. I'm going to drop the size down again, and we'll get in underneath the eye here. Get a shadow there, and then also a shadow here underneath this one, and then I'm going to increase the brush size just to spread this out a little bit here. Just like that, and then back to the eraser to kind of pull it back just a little bit. Looks good. Making the brush smaller one more time. We'll get a little bit of a shadow here on the back side of this one. Then pulling back out to see what else we need to get. A little bit here on this crease and around the back side here. Then using the smudge tool to kind of work it in a little bit. The idea here is we just don't want them to look like blobs or like solid lines. Using the smudge tool here, I can kind of blend this one in a little bit more too, so it looks a little bit more natural. Same thing here with this one, just pulling it just a little bit. So the idea is no blobs, no solid lines. If you follow any of my other tutorials, I work a lot in kind of the cell shaded technique to where I have the hard lines, but this, we have that nice kind of gradient shift between the values. That's why I like to work with this brush set quite a bit lately, just something a little bit different, and the results are a little bit different between those two different styles. So there we go. Let's go ahead and continue on here to this part of the tail. Make the brush a little bit smaller. We'll bring in this one. I'm not going to use the selection technique. Now that you've seen that, you can feel free to use it. This one I'm just going to use the erase technique. See, I'm just kind of following these along those crease lines there. And then you can also grab that smudge to kind of enhance that as it comes back and around. All right, and a little bit more here to the back of these. And I think that looks pretty good. So that's going to be it for this round of the shadows. Like I said, we're going to go back in and add a little bit more here in a second, but now let's work on the highlights. So back up here to the layers menu, I've got this kind of bright green color here. We're going to use that for the highlights. I'm going to drop the brush size down to that 7%. We've got the light source coming in from that top right. So we're going to bring these around here on the edge that faces that light source and kind of blend it in as we go. Start out with a little bit heavier of a pressure and then let up the pressure as we go into it. You can also make the brush bigger as we go into it as well. Dropping the brush size down again, these areas here. Actually, I want to make that even smaller because I want to make sure here that I'm not hitting that bottom part, to where once again we could use that selection technique here. So if you're having problems, you know, totally controlling that, you could do that to make sure that you're not hitting those other areas. I think that looks good. Get a little bit more here in the center and then blend that in with the smudge. Just got a little bit of that value shift in there. All right, back to the brush here. We'll continue bringing in some of this on the sides. Using that smudge tool to work it in. Making the brush smaller here. Bringing that around. bigger again here for this edge. As that comes down and around. So I'm just kind of following this right-hand side here. And we're going to do a secondary highlight too, so wouldn't go too crazy with this, just because we are going to work these in a little bit different as well. And back to the smudge. Alright, and then I'm going to make the brush the middle size and just kind of add one in here. Actually, we'll go the big size here. Down the center of the tail there. Okay, so there's our first round of the highlights. Coming up to the color palette then, let's move over to this lighter color here, this kind of off-white color. Make this fairly small, actually even smaller here, down to about 2%. I'm going to start to hit these edges. So we'll get a little bit more, a brighter color there around the edges. Just like that, and then using the smudge, we can kind of work that in. Adjusting my brush size, making it a little bit bigger, and then once again around the edges here. Smudge tool to kind of work it in some more. All right, back to the brush. I'm going to go with that middle size now. I'm going to start to come in here in the center. I'm kind of pulling a highlight here across. So now you can see we're getting a lot more of a shift between those different colors. Drop the brush size again, pull this in on the little fold there, the bag under the eye. Smudge to work it in. Just kind of continue this process as we go down and around. Make the brush bigger now. I got a little bit too small down here. You see pressing harder and then letting up, we get that nice flow of the color. It just blends perfectly. If you're not getting it to blend like that, it is really just all coming down to pressure. So play around with the feel and you'll eventually get it. Once again, too, playing around with the brush sizes is another key there. So I'm starting to blend this in, and I don't want it to be too small, so getting the right brush size is really going to affect how it all blends together. Big one there, bigger one here. Kind of comes down into the tail there. I think that looks pretty good. Smaller brush here. Just kind of blending these in so we've got just that shift between all the colors. Really gives off that kind of reflective quality there. And we'll go with that bigger one here. We'll do the same thing around the tail here. Oops, use the smudge for this one. All right, I think that looks good. Now I want to go in, like I said, and kind of add some of those secondary shadows in here, just like we did with the highlights. So I've got this really dark green. We're going to use that, and then we're going to switch over to the soft hatch shader. This is going to give a little bit more texture here along the parts we color in. Just got to see as far as size-wise here what I want. I think that's pretty close. So about 28, 29% is where I would suggest to be at. I'm just going real light. I don't want to add too much that isn't already there. And what this is going to do then is it's just going to kind of enhance some of those shadows that we've already got in there. It's not really making, you know, totally new ones. It's just enhancing the ones that we've already done. If you're making new ones, then you're probably doing it a little bit too dark or a little bit too heavy. And I want to move this just a little bit. Now with this, it looks really dark here just because of the settings that I've got on the camera. So I know that's showing up really dark On my end, it's not looking that dark though, so I'm going to try to adjust that so you're seeing close to the same thing that I am. Then we'll drop the size down here for these parts. Actually make it a little bit bigger for this back part now. I want some of that texture to show through here. A little bit too dark maybe on camera. That looks a little bit better. All right, kind of twisting as we go here. We'll get in underneath there on that lip. That's going to have a little bit darker, and the same thing on the chin here at the bottom where that overlap is. There and there. All right, and I think that is pretty good. Get a little bit here on the bottom. So that comes around, and same thing here. Make that a little bit bigger. Okay. A little bit smaller there underneath. I think we're good with the shadows there. I'm going to switch back over to that white or off-white color and back to the smooth or the soft rendering here. I want to add in just a little bit more here on the top of this and then blend it in. Just that looks a little bit too blocky there. Add that in and then blend it just like that. Okay, so there's the body. Let's go ahead and work on the eyes now. So back up to the layers menu, layer 5. We're going to do the same technique here. New layer, tap, clipping mask, and then we're going to switch our color to the orange. I'm going to use that middle size here. We'll start to bring in this orange around, and you'll see I'm kind of curving it like the curve of the eye here. So we want this to look three-dimensional, and it's got to follow that curve and that shape of the eye. So we've got that. Then we can come back in here to that off-white color. We'll hit that on the edge and fade that as it comes in. Once again, just kind of going really hard with our pressure and then letting up that pressure as we go in. We can use the smudge tool then to kind of bring those together so they fade in a little bit more. And now we're going to bring home those shadows. Once a darker color. Once again, that brown here, we're going to use that same technique, using that same brush size. Actually, I'm going to make that the bigger one here. We'll start to pull this around. Actually, let's go with the middle one. Once again, this is looking a little bit dark on screen compared to what it's looking here on the iPad, so I'm not going to go as dark as what I was going to, because I know it's showing up a little bit different for you guys at home. All right. So there's the eyes. Now, if you want to, you can go in with that smudge tool again and just kind of blend everything together. If you're getting a little bit too much of one color and not enough of another, and that way everything kind of ties together better. So that's it pretty much for the shadows and the highlights, the design itself. This is where then kind of here where I added some of those strokes. I'll go back in with black on a new layer with the smooth inker. I'm going to turn the stabilization off on this. And then I'll just go in and maybe add in some dots around here for some texture. So we'll get some of those in here, just kind of wherever that you think those could go. Like I said, with this, you could do extra stuff as far as, you know, spots and an extra belly color, but that was just going to add to the overall length of the tutorial. So that's why adding these in is kind of important, just because it does add a little bit more texture to everything here. Makes it a little bit more of an exciting design to look at. We can increase the brush size too if you want a change in the size of these. Once again, here it all comes down to pressure. So pressing harder gives me a bigger dot, pressing lighter gives me a smaller one. can do that. You could even come in with different colors if you wanted to as well, if you wanted to do some yellows on top of this. The problem here is the yellows, they're not going to flow with the same shadows and highlights that you've got, just because they're going to be sitting on top of everything. So I'm just going to pull in some kind of like cross hatching here. Sometimes I'll do that at the beginning. I like to save it for the end though, because with the cross hatching, if you're dragging and dropping colors in or using that color fill method, you're going to have to tap inside or drag and drop inside every single one of those cross hatches, which can get a little labor intensive to say the least. So there we go. There's our finished design. Last thing I'm going to do then is just go ahead, make a new layer and sign this guy, and we will be done. Got a little bit of a line there. I'm not sure what it's from, but hey, I'm not going to worry about it now. So there we go. The finished design, Gecko for the letter G. I appreciate you guys watching today's video. If you liked it, if you got some value out of it and you're still watching along up to this point, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up. Also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell for notifications so you can get alerted when I post new videos. Of course, there's more in this series, and there's going to be more new videos besides this series. Actually, there's going to be a really cool video coming up in September that I haven't talked about or announced yet, but I will be heading over to London for the big Procreate announcement over there. So if you guys are kind of curious what that's going to be, I personally don't know yet what it's going to be, so I'm in the dark just like you guys, but I do have an invite and I'm flying over for that. So definitely stay tuned. Be the first to know when I know more as well. So those will be some pretty cool videos. If you guys follow along with any of these tutorials, definitely feel free to post your work online. I love checking them out. So if you're on Instagram, Twitter, X, Threads, you know, everybody's changing names for everything and starting new stuff. Post them on there. Tag me at BJ Dell so I can check them out. Love seeing your work. And that's it. So for me, I can also be found online, bjdell.com. And until next time, keep creating.